Halloween night. A chill wind howled through the trees. Dead leaves swirled in the air like frightened birds. The moon hid behind a thick blanket of clouds, casting an eerie glow on the town below. Emma shivered, but not from the cold. She clutched her ghost hunting kit. Tonight was the night. She could feel it in her bones. Beside her stood Jake, his face pale in the darkness. He wasn't sure about this. This cemetery was legendary for its spooky tales. But Emma, his adventurous best friend, had insisted. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his voice a nervous tremor. Emma, her eyes sparkling with excitement, just grinned. She held up her electromagnetic detector. "Tonight we'll find out if ghosts are real." The iron gates of the cemetery loomed before them, twisted and rusty with age, standing as silent sentinels to the secrets within. They creaked open with a groan, as if warning them to turn back, the sound echoing eerily in the still night air. Emma, undeterred by the ominous atmosphere, pulled out her camera and snapped a picture, eager to capture the haunting beauty of the place. Jake hung back, his heart pounding in his chest, each beat louder than the last, as if his body was urging him to flee. The air grew colder as they stepped inside, a thick mist swirling around their feet, adding to the sense of foreboding. He felt a shiver run down his spine. Something didn't feel right. An inexplicable sense of dread settling over him. Emma, lost in her own excitement and curiosity, didn't seem to notice the growing tension in the air. She marched ahead, her flashlight beam dancing across the weathered tombstones, illuminating names long forgotten. "Come on, slowpoke," she called back, her voice echoing in the stillness, breaking the eerie silence. Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves and muster the courage to continue. He tried to ignore the prickly feeling on the back of his neck, the sensation that they were being watched. He quickened his pace, catching up to Emma as she stopped at the foot of a crumbling mausoleum, its ancient stones whispering tales of the past. If you're enjoying this eerie adventure, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling investigations. The mausoleum stood like a giant silent guardian, watching over the forgotten graves. Its stone walls were cracked and overgrown with ivy, nature reclaiming what was once built by human hands. An air of sadness and decay hung heavy around it, as if the very ground mourned the passage of time. Emma, drawn to its gloom and mystery, stepped closer, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, suddenly alert, his eyes darting around the shadowy cemetery. A soft whisper seemed to drift from within the mausoleum, like a voice carried on the wind. He couldn't make out the words, but it sounded mournful, desperate, as if someone was trying to reach out from the past. Emma, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination, held up a finger to signal for silence. She strained to listen. The wind rustled the leaves around them, creating an eerie symphony, but the whisper was gone. "Maybe it was just the wind," she said, though her voice lacked conviction, betraying her uncertainty. Jake wasn't so sure. He felt a cold spot form beside him, despite the mild night air, sending a shiver down his spine. He wanted to leave, to run back to the safety of the cemetery gates, away from the unsettling presence. But Emma was already moving towards the mausoleum's entrance, her curiosity overriding any fear, determined to uncover its secrets. The entrance to the mausoleum was a gaping black hole. Emma, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, cautiously stepped inside. The air inside was stale and cold, thick with the smell of dust and decay. Jake followed hesitantly, his heart racing. Cobwebs brushed against his face, sending shivers down his spine. He tripped over a loose stone, cursing under his breath. "Look!" Emma hissed, her voice barely a whisper. Her flashlight beam illuminated a shadowy figure huddled in the far corner of the mausoleum. It sat motionless, its form obscured by the darkness. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the figure. Was it a statue? Or something else? Something alive? Section 5. A blood-curdling scream. As they watched, the figure slowly began to rise. It moved with an unnatural jerkiness, like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. Emma, her fascination turning to fear, took a step back. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. It was so loud, so full of terror that Jake felt his blood run cold. He spun around, searching for the source of the scream. "Emma?" he called out, his voice trembling. There was no answer, only the echo of the scream bouncing off the mausoleum walls. Panic surged through Jake. He swung his flashlight around, desperately searching for Emma. Where had she gone? What had happened? The shadowy figure was gone. The only sound was the frantic beating of Jake's own heart. He called out for Emma again and again, but his voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. Fear, raw and icy, gripped him. He stumbled back, his foot catching on another loose stone. He fell, landing hard on the cold, unforgiving floor. As he lay there, catching his breath, he realized the terrible truth. Emma was gone, vanished into thin air. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. Had she run outside? Had that thing taken her? He had to find her. Jake scrambled out of the mausoleum, his eyes scanning the darkened cemetery. He called Emma's name until his throat was raw, but there was no response. He ran through the maze of tombstones, his flashlight beam a beacon in the darkness. Shadows danced around him, taking on sinister shapes in his panicked mind. The cemetery seemed to stretch on forever. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves sent his heart racing. Where was she? He stumbled to a halt, his chest heaving. He was lost, alone, and terrified, and Emma was nowhere to be found. Just when his hope began to dwindle, he saw it. A faint light flickered in the distance. It was Emma's flashlight. Relief washed over him, followed by a surge of anger. Where had she gone? Why hadn't she answered his calls? He ran towards the light, his fear replaced by a burning need to find his reckless friend. The light led him deeper into the cemetery, towards a secluded area he hadn't noticed before. As he drew closer, he heard voices. One was Emma's, but it was hushed, hesitant. The other voice was low and unfamiliar, sending chills down his spine. He pushed through a thicket of overgrown bushes and stopped short. Standing there, bathed in the eerie glow of Emma's flashlight, was the shadowy figure from the mausoleum. It was taller than Jake had imagined, its features hidden beneath a dark cloak. It held Emma's arm in a firm grip, and she looked up at it with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Let her go!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of terror and bravado. He didn't know what this thing was, but he knew he had to protect Emma. The figure slowly turned its head towards him. Jake gasped. Beneath the hood of the cloak, he saw a face. It was old and wrinkled, with eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. "Who are you?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. It just stared at him, its glowing eyes seeming to bore into his soul. Emma, sensing Jake's fear, spoke up. "He's not hurting me, Jake. He wants to show us something." She gestured towards a nearby headstone, barely visible in the darkness. Jake hesitated. He didn't trust this figure, but Emma seemed strangely calm. It was as if she were under a spell. Cautiously, he followed the figure and Emma as they moved towards the headstone. The figure pointed a bony finger at the inscription, its touch sending a shiver down Jake's spine. The inscription on the headstone was barely legible, worn away by time and weather. It seemed to whisper secrets of the past, secrets that were meant to stay buried. But as Jake peered closer, he could just make out the name. It was his name, etched in stone as if mocking his very existence. A wave of dizziness washed over him, making the world around him spin and blur. He stumbled back, bumping into the cloaked figure that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The figure turned, its glowing eyes burning into his, piercing through the darkness. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy, an electric charge that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. The figure let out a low growl, and Jake felt a powerful, invisible force push him backwards with an intensity that took his breath away. He landed hard on the ground, his head spinning and his vision swimming with stars. When he looked up, the figure and Emma were gone. He was alone, surrounded by the eerie silence of the cemetery. Scrambling to his feet, Jake didn't hesitate for a second. He ran, his heart pounding in his chest. He ran through the cemetery, not caring where he was going, just needing to escape the terror that gripped him. He didn't stop running until he reached the safety of the cemetery gates, slamming them shut behind him with a resounding clang. He never looked back, and he never, ever went back to the cemetery, especially not on Halloween night, when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. The memory of the glowing eyes and the headstone with his name remained, a chilling reminder of the night he came face to face with the unknown, a night that would haunt him forever.